Oh, hello. Today we're going to be taking a look at the different categories that are part of your medical school application. Over my time as a pre-med and doing research looking at the AMCAS itself, I've divided it into six major categories plus three, not so much minor categories, but deal breakers, as I've titled it in the website in front of us. So we have your GPA, your MCAT, your letters of recommendation, research work, clinical experience, and service. This video, we're just going to take a look at optimizing your GPA in preparation for your application. So let's navigate over to where it says pre-med advising to get started. So this website has pretty extensive description of all the different categories that I just mentioned, and I'm going to be making accompanying videos, so you don't have to waddle through. I don't know how much text this is, but it's a decent amount. Okay, so GPA. GPA is kind of the major threshold that schools look at. A good GPA for applying to medical school would be about a 3.75. I believe that's the nationally accepted average according to the MSAR. The MSAR, the MSAR, is the official database that is published by the AAMC. It's about $28. I suggest when you're applying for schools, purchasing the subscription because it gives you the most accurate information on school stats, admissions criteria, demographics, in-state versus out-of-state. And those numbers you're not going to find accurately just on the internet. I noticed during my cycle that a number of schools actually had higher admission statistics, which is a little bit unpleasant to see, but useful nonetheless. Okay, now let's talk about GPA. GPA is the accumulation of the different classes that you've taken at your university or community college. Now, as we just mentioned, you want a pretty high GPA. 3.75 is about an A minus average, sprinkled in with some A's. And this is tough. This is time consuming. So, how do we make it easier for ourselves to get to that threshold? So, I have six major topics that we should consider. So, first, what classes am I taking that quarter or semester? Are they generally considered hard or are they generally considered easy? And this goes hand in hand with when am I taking the classes? So, there's this complete illusion that I notice a lot of students have where they feel a need to be aligned with their fellow peers in terms of pacing. So for UCI, for example, traditionally you take chemistry your first year, then you take organic chemistry your second year, and you take physics your third year. Now, you might be overloaded with taking biology, let's say, at the same time as one of the other major science classes, and that's totally okay. You have room to space out your classes so that you don't have to take all of the hard classes at the same time. Now, you're most likely a STEM major, and this is a little bit unavoidable. So at one point or another, you're probably going to be taking either some type of higher math class or biochemistry or organic chemistry all at the same time, and that's part of the hustle. This journey isn't going to be an easy one. So if we're placed in a scenario like that, actually, even if we're not in a place like this, even if we're not placed in a scenario like that, we want to make sure we're taking the professors that we want to take if possible. I understand that schools have different registration times, and sometimes we're just not given the hand that we want. So I think a number of schools use different publicly available databases that allow you to gain insight into what a future class would be like. So, for example, at UCI, we have a website called Zottistics, and that gives basically different GPA curves for certain years of most classes available. There's also another website called Ant Almanac that is a little more comprehensive in that it also acts as a scheduling tool. Word of mouth goes a long way, asking your fellow peers if they've taken the class or what professors they recommend. And a central question you have to ask yourself is, do I want an easy A? Do I want a hard A and a good teacher? Or do I just want a hard teacher for the sake of a hard teacher? Now, I'm going to recommend never go with that final option. I understand that all pre-meds are a little masochistic or neurotic, but now's not the time to embrace that. If you want a hard teacher, but a good teacher, that's an option too. But you have to consider, okay, maybe I should take a lighter schedule to balance out that professor. It's better to have a good professor at a bad time than a good time with a bad professor. So, another thing I'd like to mention is that a lot of times during the school year, sometimes there really aren't great professors available. So ask yourself, can I take this at a community college and have the credit transfer, or can I take this over summer? A lot of times, summer school will be easier than during the regular quarter. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're hitting all of those pre-med requirements. So the general requirements for the vast majority of schools will be accomplished by a standard biology or a standard chemistry major, where you take usually your biology, a couple biology labs, about a quarter or semester of biochemistry, usually 1 year of general chemistry, 1 year of organic chemistry, 1 year of physics, and also usually a couple labs for general chemistry and organic chemistry. Some schools will also require a bit of a writing component, um, either a semester, 2 quarters, and I think Cornell specifically is the one that requires a full year. There are more rare schools that have like a heavy math focus. So like Carl, Illinois. I think for that school you need to take things like statistics, differential equations, advanced calculus, and even linear algebra. So if you're interested in a school like that, do some research ahead of time and make sure you're filling the prerequisites. So some tools that you can do to make life easier is make a four-year planner. I'm sure you've been told this a number of times, but four-year planner can be really useful because what I discovered is that not every class is offered when I want it to be offered. Um, so doing your research, checking the list of classes that are available and making sure that they're available per quarter that you're looking for can just make registration so much easier because registration can really be a headache. Um, Speaking from experience. So, one thing that I touched on a little bit earlier that I want to get back to is making friends in your major. I mentioned that word of mouth with can go a long way with a professor. Making friends in your major will be very advantageous um, because they have, especially if they're upperclassmen, they're going to have firsthand experience as to what it's like with a specific professor, and they will probably give you the best insight against something like uh, a school database like Statistics or Rate My Professor. The people who comment and use Rate My Professor to like rate the professors tend to have very strong or very negative opinions about that professor because there needs to be some type of emotional stimulus that would prompt you into writing a review and either lampooning a professor or dousing them with glowing generalities. So now's the time to kind of shed maybe being shy. College is a place for you to try things, for you to explore. And because there's so many people that are in your age group in such a confined space, this is the perfect opportunity to experiment. And oh, yes, find a lab partner that you know is competent. A bad lab partner can be excruciating. A good lab partner can make sometimes a difficult class substantially easier. So now that we've gone over how to organize our classes and some tips surrounding the class structure, let's talk about how to actually study. So I believe the most effective study method is called spaced active recall. So basically, what you do is once you go over the slides or the lectures, you would take a blank piece of paper and you would just write out everything you know about the class. You could do this either, you could type it up, or you could handwrite it. Um, this is um, this is a technique that's worked for me, especially in biology classes. And what you can do to make it a little bit easier, but still highly effective, is a lot of times professors will have learning objectives bullet pointed at the start or at the end of their presentation. And you can use those as guiding headlines for you to write about. After you do your writing, you take a look back at your physical notes or the slides themselves, and you compare and you mark what you missed, what you incorrectly understood, fill in the blanks, take a break, and then do it again. This I've noticed works a lot better than just reading the slides or rewriting your notes a bunch of times. Now, sometimes you do have to reread the slides because there's a deficit in understanding, and that's where just making sure you have a thorough recognition of what's going on can be more useful. So I would say jump to the spaced active recall once you have a general understanding of the course material. Then you can see what you missed and focus on using the slides to fill in your gaps of knowledge. Um, there's another strategy that's pretty similar called spaced cued recall. So this is kind of similar to the learning objectives that I just mentioned, but a little more specific. So what I would do a lot of times is I would take the entire slide deck and I would write a question for essentially every bullet point on the slide. And this is almost like making flashcards into practice problems. And then what I would do after I've accumulated, I don't know, 100 questions, is I would just, from memory, try to answer everything, go back to the slides, correct myself, and then rinse and repeat until I've thoroughly been able to answer all of the questions. Now, this sounds like a lot, but because these study methods are highly effective, you'll actually be able to fill in everything pretty quickly. And then a last major study tool I suggest everyone use are flashcards, especially for like chemistry and biology, where there's a lot of memorization. And a lot of people, I think, don't use flashcards well. Um, the highest retention factor in flashcard usage actually comes, I believe, from making the flashcard and not from doing the flashcard once or twice. Because the process of making the flashcard is very active. It's not passive. When you just read something, it's passive. Um, so once you make the flashcard, you need to have a way to hold yourself accountable so that you review the card a number of times. And so the best method that I found for that is with a beloved software called Anki. This software I would recommend to pretty much every student where flashcards are appropriate to study. This was life-saving on the MCAT. Um, Anki is a spaced repetition flashcard software that if we navigate to resources real quick, we scroll down. I have made two videos on how to set up Anki, and it'll just help you memorize definitions, um, concepts, just another tool to help you study. And I think that's everything that I wanted to cover for optimizing your GPA. Thank you.